Hello, and welcome to an amazing session that we hope just wows you and blows your socks off here at South by EDU. I wanted to make sure that I start the session and let you all know that if you have questions throughout today's session, please use Slido. While we will do Q&A afterwards, please use this amazing technology. And when it comes to policy, a lot of people really don't know the right questions to ask. So if it's helpful to use Slido, please do so. And that's, of course, slido.com, enter South by Southwest EDU, and then select room ACC 12AB. Cool. Awesome, we'll get started. So my name is Tiffany Kerns, and I am fortunate enough to be the Community Outreach Director for the Country Music Association. And as part of our corporate social responsibility, we have a charitable arm called the NAMM Foundation. And my job is to make sure that we are informed on all of our investments in the music education space. And that's really what has led to us having this amazing panel today, because we really feel that as a funder in the arts and music education sector, it's important for you to know the policy that is happening that could affect the ecosystem in which you're supporting, which is going to be a huge topic of today's discussion. So I think it's important always to have some context as to who's sitting on the stage and why we're having this conversation. So we are the charitable arm of CMA, as I said, and one of the things that makes us really unique is that as a trade association, our job is to make sure we're doing everything we can to lift the country music format. But as part of that, we have a 4-day music festival, very similar to a lot of music festivals that you all probably have in your given state or cities. But our artists are showing up for free. And they are every caliber of artist that you can imagine, from Carrie Underwood to Danielle Bradbury. For us, it is about making sure that we are raising millions of dollars over 4 days for music education. And then my job, of course, is to make sure that we are out investing that in quality programs throughout the country. We started to make music education kind of our core initiative in 2006. And since then, we've invested about $20 million in total. And that number just keeps growing and growing. Things that we are passionate about, but I can also say our panelists are also passionate about, is we believe every child should have equity and access to participate in quality music education. And quality is important because it must be quality. In order for you to have equity in the classroom, you have to offer quality. And we also believe that it needs to be sequential, that there has to be continuity in education in order for it to be successful. And we really believe that it needs to be a certified music teacher when investing in music education. But we also believe that you have to, if you are an investor in the space, you really have to make sure that the community is also involved. The community that needs it must lead it. And it is absolutely at the core of what we do. You know, it isn't about making a gift and then walking away from it. It is about educating the parent, the teacher, the principal, the superintendent, your local elected officials. For us, the entire ecosystem has to know what your gift is doing, what it intends to do, and then making sure that everyone's a part of that vision. Why do we value music education? I mean, I like to think that everyone understands and has these core values, but we believe that it gives students the foundational skills that they need to learn to be great humans. You know, we have the conversation a lot with music teachers and with arts professionals across the country when they're like, but we should also just be doing this for art's sake and for music's sake. And we totally agree with that. But when you're an investor and you're looking at data, it's also important that we are equipping our students to be great learners and to be contributors to our society as well. And we really believe that music education leads to smart students, leads to high-performing adults. I mean, it's a better world, right? I mean, can you imagine not watching a movie and listening to music? Can you imagine getting in your car and not listening to music? Can you, I mean, music is, in essence, a part of our everyday life. So why on earth would we think it would be okay for our students not to have it? And these are all those core things that I'm so obsessed with. When I say, when I talk to a parent, they're like, okay, great, but I mean, they're not even that great at music. I'm like, oh, okay, I need to show you like 15 other adjectives that you really need to be thinking through anytime your child is participating in music. Certainly that right and left side brain firing on all cylinders, but also these core things that, again, we're constantly talking about when we're making that case for music education. So how do we give students these tools to become successful adults? Again, we believe it starts with music education, among a vast variety of other things, but we believe music education is a core piece of that. So our focus, at the CMA Foundation, we are laser focused on impact investments. So if we are going to invest $10,000 to $1 million, whatever the amount is, and quite frankly, time as well, we have to know that there is impact happening. And sometimes that impact isn't always on an upward slope. Sometimes it's having hard conversations to say our retention numbers aren't great. And we work with our partners to figure out why. We do not believe in a transactional partnership. They don't work. We look to data. We absolutely respect and value what data can tell within your story, and certainly as you are creating a vision for your investment, but it's just there to inform us. I spend about 60% of my time traveling across the country to see our investments at work, because I do believe that when you're in your community and you're able to see the impact, those things, the data starts to tell the story. And so for us, we really look to data to inform us on investment making. And then all of our investment opportunities are evaluated before a strategy is delivered. So, if a school district comes to us and says they want to be a rich music education district with, robust music programming, we have to create a strategy in order to connect those dots for them. And it's not our strategy, it's their strategy. So what do you aim to do? What challenges are you going to be faced with, and how are we going to overcome those things? But we have to make sure that a strategy is in place, because the one thing that I cannot do is sit in front of the artists who give me those 4 days of their time for free and make investments that are not worthwhile. I won't do it. So for us, we're very, very intentional, and making sure that there's a strategy in place is key. And then again, we value and really do appreciate the involvement of that entire ecosystem, the community, making sure they have a voice, so that way it's their vision, it isn't ours. But the other big piece for us is that you have to work with great partners. We believe that a collaborative effort is really what aligns great strategy, but it also protects your investment. And that's kind of been the brainchild of this panel is, when we started to think through, okay, we want to make really strategic, thoughtful investments in communities all across the country. And when we started to be exposed to the field, our job was to take a step back and make sure we were aligning ourselves with partners who understood areas of expertise that we did not have. And two of my associates and colleagues, and honestly really great friends, we really look to them to help provide some of their expertise so we can be better investors. And I'm so delighted that they took the opportunity to come to South by, and that they're going to be telling you what they specifically do within their organizations and why it matters. But it's that full circle. What Eric does with NAMM and what Jane does with American, Arts Education Partnership is key to making sure that we also are successful. And I think we all lean on each other for our different areas of expertise. But I'm so delighted that you're going to hear a lot about policy today. Just some hands would be really good to know, so we have some idea of what you all currently know, what the scope is that we're working with within the room. How many of you are even aware of Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA? Cool.
Impressive.
That's great. I mean, I think that gives us some really good context. And then how many of you are using it in some capacity to inform you within your current role? Awesome. How many of you are looking for some potential guidance or a roadmap to figure out how you can better utilize ESSA? Cool. Awesome. I think that's helpful, and it will give us some context.
How many are teachers?
How many are teachers? I mean, teachers, be proud. You are teachers. Like, you have to raise your hand high.
So the rest of you are nonprofits,
Yeah,
or
that's what I was trying to
what
figure
brings
out.
you to this?
Nonprofits, yes.
It's helpful.
Music lover,
Okay.
we love you too.
Oh, perfect.
Oh,
Great.
awesome. I love it. Okay, cool. Keep us on our toes. Okay, so I will pass it along, but Eric, Ebel, and I have, I guess, we're on year 3 now, where the CMA and the foundation have been involved in some of their advocacy efforts. We use and try to use the platform that's been given to us within entertainment and bringing our artists along our journey to understand policy better and how policy can influence, again, decision-making for us. So Eric has been instrumental in creating a partnership that I think we value more than we could ever describe. So
Thank you.
I'll
Tiffany.
let you take it.
Thank you. So again, thank you, Tiffany, for involving NAMM in this panel. It's my first trip to South by Southwest EDU. It's impressive. My name is Eric. I'm a project manager with NAMM and the NAMM Foundation, a very small team. I'm going to talk a little bit about maybe a 10,000-foot view of ESSA, but first a little bit about NAMM, because we're here to also talk about resources, as Tiffany outlined all the things that that great organization is doing, and Jane will outline some of the great things that her organization does that will provide you with resources in this work. I want to give you a little bit of a background of NAMM and how we do things, especially for folks that are with organizations that are maybe looking to activate your membership to become active advocates in the field. NAMM is made up of 10,300 plus companies around the world, united in our belief in the life-changing, life-enhancing power of music. It's crystallized in our vision, which is we envision a world in which the joy of music making is a precious element of everyday living, in which every child has a deep desire to learn music and a recognized right to be taught, and a world in which every adult is a passionate champion and defender of that right. Everything that NAMM does grows out of that vision. So, a little bit of history. NAMM was founded in 1901. It's the National Association of Music Merchants, in case you're wondering what that acronym means, because it was founded by 52 piano merchants around 2 policy issues. One was intellectual property, because there were piano knockoffs in that day, and music education. It has grown into a $17 billion music, sound, and event tech products trade association. Since our start, music advocacy has been a foundational activity of our industry's culture. And this activity is the work of the NAMM Foundation. NAMM Foundation is a nonprofit arm of NAMM. It celebrates, promotes the value of music education through grants, research, and advocacy. As I mentioned, 117 years of we've been promoting the benefits of music education and music making. And as you might expect from a trade association full of merchants and manufacturers, most of that advocacy for the last century was in the form of advertisements and PR. This is from our archives. I just really love this stuff. It's mainly slogans in this sort of top-down approach. Country or Western, it's one of my favorites. Or sweet, hot, or blue, or I think the one that got me was, "You're the center of attention," that kid on the drum set, right? Or maybe the best one is, "Adults, who says you can't make music?" It's like a huge assumption. But this was our strategy for a century, basically. This spans from early 1900s until the very end of the 20th century. And it seems, although it seems pretty elementary right now, and we think of our social connectivity and the way that we connect and engage each other now, you could argue that this had a pretty profound effect. It could be said pretty accurately that in our society, music making is considered a valuable activity, period. But just like policy has course corrections, laws course correct, organizations course correct, we did at the beginning of this century, we had a course correction and started focusing on our NAMM membership right where they were, right in their homes, right in their home districts, in their states, right at the grassroots. And our strategy now has, obviously, since we have a pretty tiny staff, we can't be everywhere at once. So we know that advocacy wins happen on a local level. And so we started to engage our members right where they are. Not necessarily geographically, but if there were a spectrum of advocates, wherever they are on that spectrum, whether they're someone who believes that music education is a great idea, but has no idea how to take the next step, or someone who's sitting on a state committee that decides curriculum, any level. We started providing advocacy materials that were relevant to them. Instead of telling them what to do, we started really asking our members, what do you need from us? And they needed basic things like, why learn to play music? Give us the benefits of playing a musical instrument. How to form a district coalition. You keep telling us that we need an advocacy coalition. Well, how do we do it? So templates and PowerPoints and all kinds of stuff like that, sort of granular materials. And we've sent out in the last 12 years, millions and millions of copies of this stuff. So our members are using this over and over. And we started to host, as you see here, our advocacy flying in DC. We started to host that 15 years ago, where we'd bring first a small group of delegates or NAMM member business owners to Washington, D.C. And of course, we'd teach them a little bit about policy, but more than that, we would empower them and embolden them to do this kind of advocacy work. It's only one aspect of advocacy. Advocacy is not just meeting with your elected officials. That's just one sort of lever. But what we found was all these advocates, all these members, were already advocates. We were sort of, pardon the expression, but we were releasing the advocate giant within, basically, awakening this. So it was very informative for our organization. And about 15 years ago, we started the Support Music Coalition, which is another peer-to-peer sharing group that at the time met once a month on a conference call with unmuted microphones and dogs barking and cars passing and, unintended conversations happening. It was really messy, really sloppy. We didn't really know what we were going to do with all this information. We just started. We just started from where we were as an organization and started doing this. That coalition has grown to over 70,000. It started with 22 at first call. It's grown to over 70,000. Now, we don't have conference calls for 70,000 anymore. We meet in different ways now, but 70,000 plus organizations or individuals that are keeping their ear to the tracks, basically, as to what's happening in national education policy.
And if I may interrupt you, Eric, I think something that's really powerful about that is oftentimes we always hear within the music education community that they are not supported. It could not be further from the truth because there are so many organizations that are spending their entire careers doing everything that they can to raise the profile of music education, but also advocating for it day in and day out. So sometimes I know that you all could be potentially representing a field that doesn't feel like they're represented. I mean, we're just 3 organizations of a lot. I mean, we all have, and you'll certainly hear from Jane about some of the organization that she supports, but I think it's powerful because 70,000 people care about what's happening and what the state of music education is in our country. And NAMM is just one of the many organizations that has these resources.
It's a great point. I mean, we find that all the time. Just a quick side on that same, just getting people to get outside of their silos to talk to one another. We have the same problem in our organization. Just to talk to the person in the next department is difficult. This is not a unique challenge to human beings. We dig down into our own expertise and our own comfort zones. But we find it all the time. We run a program called Best Communities for Music Education. And part of that, the centerpiece of that program is an audit that a district has to complete. So we hear all the time that schools talking to other schools for the first time, music educators at one school for the very first time talking to music educators at another school in their district, And just by collecting this data, it's such a step forward. And it brings up this other fundamental challenge that we have, or anybody that's trying to influence education policy in any way on a national level, is the fact that there are, over 14,000 school districts. 14,000 school districts that all of them have this governing board and a whole slew of administrators that are dedicated and working really, really hard, overtaxed faculty, and huge, diverse student populations. It's no wonder that this stuff is difficult. The good news is, as it relates to NAMM as a resource, we have over 7,000 companies in the United States, well over 500,000 individual citizens that are really passionate about this, and they make great partners for advocacy. So if you're in a state and you're interested, you can always contact me or anybody on this panel, and we can connect you with some great NAMM member advocates that are just dying to expand their advocacy scope. So my other task on this panel is to give you a quick 10,000-foot view of ESSA, and we're going to unpack some of that now. So this is going to be real broad overview. If you know a lot about ESSA, just check your email or something. But just a quick background. In 1965, ESEA, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, was signed by President Johnson. In general, this was a civil rights law, basically civil rights that granted equal access to quality education to every student in the United States, right? So this is one observation I've had for the last 15 years working with advocates, because there's always a sense of, are we done yet? I mean, how long does it take to fix this? But when you step back and consider, I got to share a cab ride one time with former Secretary of Education Richard Riley, an amazing guy. So I had questions already in case that ever happened, and this was one of those, bucket list moments. And so I asked him about that. I said, isn't this frustrating? We keep asking for the same thing. Every year we're asking for the same thing. He said, it's not frustrating at all, young man. He said, which felt great. He said, policy, these laws are humans' attempt to affect culture. And culture changes very slowly. It's measured in generations and centuries. It's not measured in decades, or certainly not in administrations. It will change my life according to the work that we're trying to do here. So my message is, this is 50 years, more than 50 years ago, a law was written that said every child in America has access to quality education. Now we know that doesn't happen yet, hasn't happened yet. So my message for this slide is, this stuff takes a long time, and we're attempting to shift and course correct along the way. In fact, it's built in. Course corrections happen, reauthorizations happen every 10 years or so, give or take some. So the last reauthorization was in 2001, No Child Left Behind. Solved a lot of issues, also created some unintended consequences, basically narrowing the curriculum, I guess, is what a lot of people perceive. Narrowing the curriculum, measuring, introduce something known as core academic subjects, right? That really emphasize those and narrowed the curriculum and caused teachers to do what they felt was teaching to the test. We've all heard all this stuff, right? So course correction, the latest course correction, I guess, was in 2015, 14 years later, with the passage of ESSA. And you can see President Obama signing that into law. And the huge takeaway from this is it shifted much of the authority, not all of the authority, but much of the authority from the federal and responsibility, authority and responsibility from the federal level to the state level. So how does this affect the arts? Well, in general, the headline for us, and this took thousands and thousands of people working really, 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 really hard to make these changes that might seem small. It replaced core academic subjects with well-rounded, which reflects this clear intent to support the arts. What's more, it includes art and music in the definition. It's 2 of 19, but that's amazing. That music is written into that law is remarkable. It offers opportunities for support through Title I, Title II, and Title IV, which we might get to unpack a little bit more in a few minutes. It encourages arts integration across subjects, and it requires stakeholder engagement as part of the state plan process. That's really big, especially for advocates. So, are we there yet, basically? Another observation, as I said, this takes a long time, you know? It never ends. Our government, our laws, our society, our culture, it's an organic thing. It's always growing. And what you feed grows, and what you don't feed doesn't grow. You can't stop feeding your garden or your kids. So this never stops. It never ends. Advocacy, as most of you probably know, is something you just are. It's just something that you do every day of your life. So just a quick timeline. So where are we since 2015? So this is what happens. So after it was signed, for 10 months, negotiations, final regulations were decided. 10 months later, those regulations given to the states. There's 3 bullets that are sort of combined here. Because for 10 months, states develop plans, peer-to-peer review, submitted to the Department of Ed, back and forth. You know, by September 2017, pencils down, all the plans were supposed to be into the Department of Ed. So here, now we're here, right? 2018. Since September, Department of Ed has been reviewing, commenting, suggesting revisions to state plans. This is a huge opportunity for an advocate because this law requires stakeholder engagement, and school districts are required to submit plans that match their state plans. This is a great opportunity. We'll probably unpack this in a second more. So I'll wrap up and turn this over to Jane, who can help us unpack some of the opportunities. But I just wanted to share what we share with our advocates, those 70,000 advocates that are saying to us, how do I impact change? It's complex, it's complicated. So we came up with the 3 R's for action, right? Reinforce. This is when you're talking to school board or district leadership. Reinforce. What's in the law? Well-rounded includes music education. And then remind, 2nd R, remind them about the benefits, stuff that Tiffany talked about. Strengthens the student's connection to school, has positive impact on school climate, builds critical thinking skills, cooperation, collaboration, concentration, ability to compromise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are proven benefits. Request, and then request. Request district leadership to assess if music education is included for all students. Request that they use Title I, Title II, and Title IV funds to expand access to music. Assure that music education is part of the school accountability and assessment measures reported to state and federal Department of Ed. In closing, as advocates, we have an incredible opportunity because of the effort of generations, thousands of men and women, whole careers spent to get us to this point right now. This point will never come again. This point in time will not repeat. So I would urge you, whether you feel like you're an advocacy or a policy expert, none of that matters. Because you're here, you're an advocate. Start from wherever you are, step in, and become that champion, the defender of every child's right to music. Thanks.
Eric?
How does this work?
You just press the green button.
Hey. Hello, everybody. I'm really thrilled to be here as well. This is my first time at South by Southwest EDU, and it's a treat to be able to do this alongside two of the Arts Education Partnership's very strong partner relationships with CMA and NAMM. And I'm going to talk to you about the Arts Education Partnership, who we are, what we do in just a minute. But before I do that, I'm going to talk to you about where the Arts Education Partnership resides. And when I say that, it's to give you a better idea of the reach and the scale that we have to reach policymakers. So the Arts Education Partnership is a cooperative agreement that is funded by the National Endowment for the Arts and the U.S. Department of Ed. It is competed for every 4 years, and it presently resides at an organization called the Education Commission of the States. To tell you a little bit about the Education Commission of the States, we are a nonpartisan, bipartisan policy organization that addresses all education issues from early childhood through access to college. So though my role here today as the director of the Arts Education Partnership is to talk to you about music and arts education, at ECS, or Education Commission of the States, if you have a policy concern around education, you can find a lot of great information through our organization and the great and talented colleagues I have that work on issues like high school, STEM, and things like that. So ECS survives as an organization. It's been around since the 60s. It was birthed out of a compact among the states, and it survives through state dues and through the notion of being bipartisan and nonpartisan and addressing education stakeholders across the continuum of the education policy landscape. So when I say who those stakeholders are, they are the governors, the chief state school officers. For those of you not familiar with that terminology, it's your state superintendent. It's also chairs of the Senate Education, chairs of the House Education, higher education officers, and other policy leaders such as state boards, school boards, legislative staff, governor's staff, and such. We have big meetings every year, and we bring together all these people in one room, all around the idea of coming together about interest in education to inform the policies that they pass in their states. So what we do is, at ECS, we conduct research for anybody to access. We write reports. We testify and provide counsel because we ground everything we do in rigorous research, and it is unbiased and not partisan. And in addition, as I mentioned, we hold big meetings. So that is the big organization that wraps around the Arts Education Partnership, and I have the luxury of being able to tap that expertise on each side of me, even though I'm focused on music and the arts. So the Arts Education Partnership, as I mentioned, funded by the National Endowment for the Arts and the U.S. Department of Ed, it brings together over 100 arts and education organizations, including CMA and NAMM, and we pride ourselves in serving as the nation's hub for all these organizations to come together around the notion of arts and music as part of a child's well-rounded education. We provide research. We also provide opportunities to convene. We communicate. We disseminate information. And most importantly, and this is why I mentioned who our parent organization, Education Commission of the States, is is we work really hard to help organizations like CMA and NAMM connect outside of the silo of music and the arts. We translate that work broader to policymakers and education so they truly understand the impact that music is having on a child's life, and they can see or be pointed to success stories around why the work that CMA is doing and investing in and NAMM and the work they're doing, why it's making a difference in a kid's life so they can learn from it in their own states and maybe address it and get ideas of how to take it home and populate it other places. So I mentioned that both CMA and NAMM are strong partners, but other examples of our partner organizations, and I intentionally did not put CMA and NAMM on this slide because I wanted to have some more space to give you some more examples of other organizations. You will notice that they are names that are highly familiar. You also can find on our website a complete listing of the 100 organizations, and they are hyperlinked, so it can drive traffic to straight to the CMA page, straight to the NAMM and NAMM Foundation page. So I'll give you our website information that will show you who our 100+ partner organizations are. We work intentionally to be focused on both the arts and music side of organizational health as well as the education side of the house. So we work closely with the National PTA, the National Association of Elementary School Principals, because once again, it's critical for us to be able to bring arts and music organizations together with education organizations so everyone is driving the bus in the same direction. And ironically, the Kennedy Center is a very strong partner and friend of ours, and they have a competing session down the hallway.
And I should add too, Jane, on that slide, you know, we talked again about the ecosystem. Every single person who has influenced and or is involved in, you know, having a thriving music education program are partners of AEP. And it's, again, because we realize we're a lot stronger together if we're all moving toward the same vision as opposed to separate. So I actually applaud their organization tremendously for making sure that we have a place where we're constantly learning from one another. So again, we just have a stronger message.
Absolutely. And you'll notice that within some of these organizations, there are advocacy organizations. Americans for the Arts is a very strong advocacy-oriented organization. I am not, the Arts Education Partnership does not take advocacy stances. We do not take political stances. What we do is supply these organizations with research, information, opportunities to convene policy information about what's working in certain states to arm folks that are advocacy or have advocacy branches in their organizations to do the best work they can do to message their work, okay? So at this point, I want to give you some things that you might enjoy finding at our website and give you some advanced organizers for things that are happening among our 3 organizations. Right now we have a policy brief that's a short 3-pager that you can access for free on our website called Music Matters. It is, and I'm not sure if Eric knows this because he's requested copies of it for quite a few years, but it's our most popular music deliverable at the Arts Education Partnership. We're very excited to be updating that product. We'll be releasing it with the help of CMA Foundation and NAMM in May, and what it's designed to do is arm folks like you who are in positions where you want to be champions for music with short, digestible information in a short 3-page trifold around why music makes a difference in a child's life and in further success in life. So one of the things that AEP and the Education Commission of the States takes its greatest pride in is the ability to take really complex, rigorous research and translate it to quick, digestible, easy to read, doesn't take a lot of time, sound bites in short policy briefs. politicians that we work with very closely and have spent our careers doing so do not want to read a dissertation on why music makes a difference in a kid's life. They are willing to read a couple bullet points on a 3-page, and so we work very hard in supplying that kind of information. You'll also find that we'll write trends papers that look at things like social emotional learning and maybe the role of music in the arts and social emotional learning. We also gear products directly to certain constituencies. We're rewriting a policy brief with the National Association of Elementary School Principals for their summer conference on what school leaders can do to increase arts education. And that's an important deliverable both for the arts and the music sectors, because research suggests that the second to teaching quality, the school leader is the most important factor in whether arts and music are happening in schools. So it's a huge constituency for us to reach. And just released yesterday, and you can see this on our website, is a deliverable called ArtScan at a Glance, where we work with state arts representatives and in each of the 50 states and Washington, D.C., to look at how the arts are articulated in the state plan and how it's aligned with policy. And you can see that, and it's collated and collected into a 2-page document where you can see where your state stacks up against other states across the country.
This is a huge resource. I mean, you essentially have an organization that has done all of the work for you. Mm-hmm. So I highly recommend looking at it and just seeing where your state, is in comparison to others. I like to believe that people do business with people, but people do business with smart people. And so if you're able to articulate, hey, I know what's happening in our state as you lead conversations around music and arts education, you become more of a powerhouse, and people are paying attention to what you're saying. They're hanging on to every word because they realize that you've done the homework to understand where you currently stand in terms of policy on that statewide level.
Yeah, great. So a couple more resources that you should know about. Every 2 weeks, we put out an email called the ArtSide Digest, where we feature work happening across the country, both within our 100 partner organizations, their meetings, the things that they do that make a difference, things like this conference, as well as beyond the 100 organizations, just across the arts continuum. Now today, I'm joining music associations, and they're a huge part of our partnership, and as both Tiffany and Eric have talked about, they have enormous reach. But at the Arts Education Partnership, we also are equal opportunity with theater, dance, and visual arts as well. I'm not going to lie to you, it's a lot easier to get the music industry to write success stories and do impact stories than theater and dance. They just don't seem to have the capacity, or in fact, they do not have the capacity to gear up the way the music industry does. So lastly, 3 other resources that you can find just on the AEP website, and I'll give that to you at the very end, is ArtsEdSearch. We are the first and only national clearinghouse of the rigorous research that exists on why arts make a difference in a kid's life. The Arts Education Partnership convenes a panel of national scholars 3 times a year to review and vet arts education research to determine if it's worthy of being put in this database called ArtsEdSearch. You can access this. Those of you who are grant writers, who are out trying to secure money and need better information on why music makes a difference in a kid's life, I encourage you to go to this website. It is cross-referenced to early childhood, high school. It looks at student outcomes. It looks at teacher outcomes. You can click boxes, and research will appear for you and access to those research studies. And it's an excellent tool for you to use for your own grant writing, for your own advocacy work, and for your own kind of position papers of when you're trying to really defend what you're doing and why it makes a difference in a kid's life. I mentioned ArtScan. It's brand new. It's the scan of the 50 states and what arts and music policy looks like. And lastly, as we circle back to ESSA and the Every Student Succeeds Act, the Arts Education Partnership has convened an ESSA working group, and we have teased out the law to these different areas of mapping opportunities for the arts. So as Eric addressed the opportunities for music within ESSA, what we did at the Arts Education Partnership is we then teased those out within Title I, accountability, assessment, state plans, stakeholder, well-rounded tiers of evidence, and we wrote short 3-page policy briefs on what the opportunity for the music and the arts is, examples of how it's happening in the states, and some probing readiness questions for you as you consider if it's viable for you to be trying to leverage some of those funds within the law. Now, this is a dynamic document. If you feel like you've seen it before because it was released a year ago, you did see it before, but you didn't see it in its current version, because as these state plans have been rolling out, we have been updating new examples of things. And that is a picture of ArtsEdSearch, just so if you're ever on the website and you're back at trying to get rigorous research, to remind you of that. And lastly, that's the website information for you to get all of this through social media, Facebook, Twitter, and my website will connect you to their websites if that helps.
How many, I'm curious to know, how many of you have read your current state plan that was submitted? I think that's probably a really good piece of homework. And only because it again informs you on priorities for your state. When, you know, ESSA happened and it gave back the responsibility to the state, I think as constituents, you really should know what they're putting as priorities and where arts and music falls within those state plans. And there are a ton of organizations that are paying close attention to those state plans, the 3 of ours being among those, and what was written, how it was written, and as Jane mentioned, I mean, they're changing. So we're constantly paying close attention to that document. I think that's a huge, I don't know, it's like the future.
I talk to advocates all the time, NAMM members that are, you know, saying, oh my gosh, we have to do something. This is our great opportunity. You know, I thought we passed this federal law, but there's still no music in my school, you know. And I send them to ArtsEdSearch every time, the first stop, you know. And the fact that you have these ESSA documents, I didn't know about those, I'm embarrassed to say. But those will definitely be up, you know, starting Friday, because that's what our members are looking for. You know, like Tiffany said, you know, when we go in and meet with elected officials, if you can meet them where, and let them know that you know where we are and what the opportunities are, and you also know what they need and how arts and music can solve those issues, you're so far ahead of the pack in getting anything done.
That's interesting. And so now we'll go to Q&A. Okay, so Texas's latest draft of the 87-page ESSA plan has most focus on ELAR, math, statewide testing, special ed. How do we start to advocate for increasing arts ed? Great question. So I think that we will probably have to tag team these questions, and feel free to use this, but also, I mean, shout out if you have a question too. I don't think anybody up here is shy. You know, I think having the desire to want to advocate is, quite frankly, the hardest part. And then I think it's looking at what is currently happening in your state to join forces with, because again, we're a lot stronger as a community if we're doing this together rather than separate. Because like anything, you know, in terms of marketing, you have to hit someone over the head. I think the latest document that I see internally through our marketing team is like 27 times before someone truly gets it. So think about this whenever you're talking about arts ed policy. I mean, that is making sure that the message is consistent, it's concise, but it's effective. So it's important that I feel, you know, Eric talked about this, you know, they have given very specific messaging to their members, so that way their members are delivering the same voice constantly. And that's when people start to remember, okay, wait, every time we go to the Hill, it's like they know exactly what we're going to say because we've been very consistent with messaging. So that's the first thing that I would do is look at what is currently happening in your state before you really start to decide where you can be helpful. I also think that this stuff is going to take time. These state plans are new. This is new for everyone. And having, conversations at the state level, I mean, this is something that it's going to take a few years for them to grasp. But again, that's why we have to arm ourselves now and make sure that the message is consistent. So that way, year after year after year, as we start to communicate these things, it's natural for anyone to immediately be able to absorb what you're saying. I would also say, in terms of increasing, I'm again going back to those partners, but also looking at what your area of expertise or your skill set is, and then where it fits within that larger plan. I always, when we have conversations with parents, with teachers, with principals, with superintendents, I tell them they all have a specific skill set. Yes, that it funnels into that greater vision for how to increase music education within a state. But I'm like, you look at music education through a different lens. You offer a different perspective, and it's important that we're taking advantage of your perspective and your lens. So I would also be, pushing for each of you to look at the current lens that you have and the area of expertise that you can offer a bigger involvement, what your involvement will be. I really do think it's paying attention to your own area of expertise. Our area of expertise is we represent the entertainment business. Like, we have a group of individuals, we have television shows. Like, how can we utilize our assets to further the mission of music education across our state, but also across the country? That's specific to us. Yes, we align with the vision of everyone, but what can we be doing specifically for SDMA to help move the initiative forward? Would you all add anything to that?
I just can't say enough the importance of impact stories and being able to just quickly generate stories around what the program is, how it was funded, how it's going to be sustainable, and why it makes a difference in a kid's life. Because if you are able to tell that story, and if you can do it ponied up to a science teacher or a math teacher, and it's no extra amount of resources, in fact, it's a efficiency situation, I think it's much easier to make the case when you're asking how to advocate for it if you've got a good story.
All I'd add, I agree with that completely. I would just add that the point about finding out, listen for a minute and find out where your state is. Not only reading the briefs, maybe on on Jane's site, but also finding out who's doing this work already. I know in Texas, if you're talking about music, there's a really powerful organization here. TMEA is all over the state plan, and they're so far down in this, it would be a catastrophic mistake to sidestep an organization that's already. It's sort of like you invite guests over to dinner and they start reorganizing your dining room. It's not very well received. You have to understand who's already doing this work, and like Tiffany said, find out where you fit in that. So that's really, I think, really important advice.
So next question, what key differences are you seeing in ESSA implementation plans from state to state, and are there any trends you're seeing? Jane, you're probably...
Well, one of the trends we're seeing right now is people that are trying to use professional development, which is Title II, for investing in professional development for arts and music for teachers. We're seeing them write that into their state plan intentionally, rather than just this global, and by the way, there's PD and you can use it for anything. They're being intentional around how much is going to be discretely used for music or arts education.
That's awesome. Huge win for us. And then would you say, are you seeing the trend where some states may mention it once or twice and other states are mentioning it more, or is it is it staying pretty equal?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, it comes down to how many people do you have on the bus and who's championing the longest and largest about it. But that's a hard question for me to answer because there's a few examples that come to mind. California is doing such amazing work, but it's California, right? And Tennessee is doing interesting things, you know. So.
And you mentioned California. You know, NAMM doesn't have the staff to really support each state. So basically, we wait till NAMM members bubble up and say, I want to get involved, and then we put them to work. We connect them to their state organization. But 2 years ago, we went to Sacramento, and you know, we knew ESSA was coming down the pike, and we realized that the visual and performing arts standards were 15 years out of date. You know, like that would have been a catastrophic. We would have been, you know, left behind in the dirt. So, you know, that's one of those opportunities that you see by connecting with, in this case, CMEA, California Music Educators Association. They were on this for 10 years trying to get that. But we just like stormed the Capitol that year, and standards got updated, and we're, you know, in a much better position to take advantage of ESSA. So.
Next question, what data has been collected that supports how arts ed increases student achievement in core content areas? I mean, I feel like there's been quite a bit of research.
Yeah, you can find quite a bit of research. Not sure I understand what data there's a lot of research, but I don't know if it's asking specifically around what data has.
I mean, if I got this email, I would send them to ArtsEdSearch.
Right, and
I mean, it's so deep. It's staggering how robust that research database is.
What I will say too is within the arts and music ed research content areas, I mean, the one thing we don't lack is research.
right.
That's
I
right.
mean, there is plenty of it. I think what we have not been great about is funneling it all to one place so everyone can find it very easily, which is why Jane's resource is a good one to have. It's a really good one to have. Can ESSA make it easier to purchase technology that helps music lessons in schools, or the focus is mainly in getting music lessons supported at all?
Easier to purchase technology.
So that would be an example of something that it just depends on what the proposal is. So there are opportunities right now for music to, they're hot on within the law for arts to be included in STEM, arts integration into STEM. So if you're writing a proposal and there's a necessity for technology or certain musical instruments, then it would be funded through Title IV 21st Century Learning Community funding, and that would be the way that would work. But then, of course, that will be at the discretion of the person who is the comptroller.
Right.
Right.
And we also are seeing an increase, at least as a grantor, with PD specifically surrounding music technology. I mean, it's something that,
Yeah, we see that too.
you know, we definitely see increasing. So, I mean, the industry, the music education industry really is starting to look at how we implement technology. Take, you know, the state plans and ESSA out of it. Just grant requests that I'm receiving really are starting to look, you know, ahead to music technology. So no, that's something we're seeing. It's a trend that we're seeing. Do you have personal stories to share about how music has impacted your lives and attracted you to your current roles? And how much time do we have? Because, I mean, I think that's a loaded question, but, you know, for me, I was not a musician, and I'm currently taking piano lessons because I wanted to know how hard it was for students to be doing the work that I'm out advocating for daily, and it is by far the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But I also think for us as an organization, music is in our DNA. It's a part of our organization, and so we just take the stance that every child should be able to participate and have the opportunity to do so. So I don't know that there's a specific thing that has attracted us to advocate for music education other than it's in our DNA.
I grew up in Elkhart, Indiana, which was the band instrument manufacturing capital of the United States. So it was in my DNA from a very early age. So.
Yeah, there was that moment for me when I was in 5th grade in Texas, in Baytown, Texas, and I finally was in a band class, and I had just been reprimanded for being really creative with font in my English class. I made, won't get into it, but it was definitely not what the teacher wanted and overly creative. She didn't look at the content, and I got an F. And so I had learning disabilities that I didn't know. We didn't diagnose ADHD and a lot of tracking issues at that time. So nobody really knew that. I just thought I was stupid. I just thought I was dumb because I thought things differently. And so I had that experience with this band director, and I was, playing we were learning to sight read, and I took his directions verbatim and was playing everything backwards because that's what he said. He stopped the band and called me out, Mr. Ebel, do you realize what you're doing? And I thought, here we go again. Here's an educator in front of my peers that's going to tell me that I'm stupid. I'm dumb. I don't learn right. My brain don't work right, And I was convinced. And he said, that's the first time anybody's ever followed my direction exactly. And he said, it changed my life. It totally made me feel like I could do something. And I pursued music for the rest of my life. I mean, it changed the trajectory of this little middle school kid's life forever. And I hear that story over and over and over. If it's not there, what's going to change that kid's life? What's going to tell that kid that the way that they think, the way that they process, the way that they're creative is okay. In fact, it's valuable. So yes, I've had definitely that experience. So.
I love it. Well, thank you all so much. We didn't get to the last question, but you know how to find us, and so we're happy to make sure that we answer it offline. But thank you all for giving us an hour of your time. We hope that it was helpful, and we hope that you will be joining our advocacy efforts in some form or fashion, and certainly encourage you to do so in your states. So thanks so much, guys.
Tiffany. Thank you.
Thank you.